Hello there, and welcome to Babbling
with the boys and girls.
And I've just shaved, and I look like a 12-year-old. I got my baby face going on.
Hi, I'm Sabrina check, and yes, my name is like a check mark.
Whoa. Okay, slow down, everybody. Hold on. What's going on here, Carson? Okay, man, I sleep up one time, I show up to work with no pants one little time, and all of a sudden I'm chopped liver. You replace me?
Well, you can't be showing your widdly diddly to the world, okay?
You're probably like, what the heck's going on? This isn't the usual lineup. This is how we usually start the podcast. Well, folks, do we have a special treat for you today? Because today we have guest stars. On the podcast, we have Sabrina Check, and if you would like, you could go check out her YouTube channel, Sabrina Check. That's Check, Sabrina Check. You can check out her YouTube channel if you're so inclined. And Carson, why don't you tell the lovely folks at home today what we are doing?
What we're doing today is we're doing a debate. We are going to debate what is the best superhero movie of all time. That question will be answered here today, and nobody will it'll be written in stone. It will be the commandment of the superhero movie. Please, all rise for the entrance of the honourable judge, Roxanne Kondos.
Hello, everyone.
We are not worthy.
Not worthy.
Hello there. I'm very excited to be here. I'm super excited to judge. I've been binge watching Judge Judy. I'm ready to break up some fights, instigate some fights, and absolutely figure out which one of you made your point better.
What movie am I doing? I brought the favorite, Spider-Man 2. All right, Spider-Man 2. This movie is my favorite movie of all time. What do you mean, why would I do this? Why else would I do this movie?
I am picking the right choice. All opinions be damned. This is a fact that this is the best superhero movie. And it is The Dark Knight.
I picked Endgame because it was the last movie that we got to watch in 2019 before the pandemic. And it was wholesome.
Okay, round one, superhero things. Every person is going to have roughly 3 minutes of uninterrupted time to talk about their movie and kind of lay the basis for their argument. After everyone has had their 3 minutes, we will then move into 10 minutes of chaos, i.e. debate time.
Okay. Take a walk with me, folks. And what impressed me by Spider-Man 2 is for a sequel, it is arguably, actually no, screw that, it is the best sequel of all time. That's right, I said it, Terminator 2 ain't boogaloo next to Spider-Man 2. It takes the tropes of the superhero movie that the first movie laid out, and it says, hey, let's improve on them. The actual tropes in the movie, visually even, the superhero tropes themselves, the action scenes are out of this world. Mwah! Spider-Man actually goes out of his way to save people in this movie. And on top of all, it actually makes being Spider-Man look hard. I'm tired of superhero movies acting like being a superhero is easy. When you see Spider-Man 2, you're like, damn, that looks hard. His life looks terrible. Why would he do this? Because Spider-Man is a hero. And it proves to you how there's a hero inside all of us. Spider-Man 2 just proves to everybody, small and tall, what it is to be a hero.
Endgame is probably one of the best Avengers movie I've seen. I thought I really liked Age of Ultron for a really long time, but no, Endgame. It had something. All of the references they were all put into just this one movie, and the fans went wild in the audience. So yes, I loved it. I loved it so much. You know, they also had their like assemble moment, and that was like, you saw it coming, because every superhero movie has that. I mean, like Suicide Squad 2, it's not just Marvel, I mean, there's a whole bunch. But they really touched upon a female lead, scene. I think it was when all the female superheroes got together and they had their little moment. I thought that was just kind of forced into the movie, so I'd have to knock 1 point off of Endgame for just that. You know, because they have other projects with female leads coming out, and yes, you want to include that one scene into this movie for 2019, and you know, we're changing history and making things happen, but like, why? It was kind of random. Endgame just has this like love and compassion in it. Yeah.
Superhero things in The Dark Knight. Now, The Dark Knight, like Spider-Man, does talk about the responsibilities of the hero, the superhero, but I think it does it a little bit better. It talks about the responsibility of, can you save everyone? And should you put that burden on you? One of the deepest things that a lot of superheroes have to go with is, when do they know when they're not needed anymore? When do they stop? And I think that's really apparent in this movie when they have the whole White Knight versus Dark Knight thing. The White Knight of Harvey Dent versus the Dark Knight of Bruce Wayne, of Batman. And when does a superhero let other people do the superheroing for them? People who don't need to wear it. As the story goes forward, the Joker is forcing the Batman to reveal his identity to the world. When should he do that? When is it his responsibility to save people by revealing his own identity? That is the marks of what every superhero has to go through. Spider-Man has to go through it in the great comic book Civil War, but it doesn't go through it in Spider-Man 2. And in The Dark Knight, they bring both the thing from Spider-Man 2 of him trying to realize when he's not needed, when he needs to let things go, and then mixing it up with, when do you reveal your true identity? When is the burden too much for Batman? Is the symbol more important than the lives? That is the deepness that this film goes into. It's really impactful with that symbol versus it has these deep themes that a lot of superheroes go through in their comic book career, but it mixes it all into this beautiful blending pot, and you think it's going to be too much. I think it's going to be too much for Batman to handle.
So, 10 minutes of chaos. Here you guys can rip into each other.
May I just start off by saying, Sabrina, you played it pretty damn smart by pointing out one of the flaws and taking out one of the things that I was going to say against this movie. The Dark Knight is a crime film. It's a damn good crime film, but Spider-Man is a superhero movie. The whole movie, he just gets the crap kicked out of him, both physically and emotionally. When Mary Jane comes to him at the end of that thing, and she's in the wedding dress, and you're like, wow. I mean, a piece of you is also like, damn, man, like, isn't your boss gonna be mad at you because, you know, his son was supposed to marry your girlfriend and then she left your son at the altar? But what I'm saying is, it inspires like, hey, you know what? Maybe good actions are rewarded. While The Dark Knight is more cynical and realistic, Spider-Man is more uplifting, as a hero movie should be. Mic drop.
I can't lean back any further, but I dropped the mic.
And I think Avengers Endgame has great superhero moments. They don't really feel warranted. Like the whole Professor Hulk thing. Like, that's really cool. But it's kind of just blended over, and then he like takes pictures of kids and dabs, and you're like, this isn't really what I wanted from my like Professor Hulk. Like, come on.
I did grow up with Spider-Man 2, I'm not gonna lie, and having two brothers, older brothers, constantly talk about that movie is just like, I don't know, it gets a little annoying at some points, but I mean, there's so much memes in that movie. I love it. I love it for just that now. I don't know why, but I think I love every superhero movie for the memes. But I mean, like, Dark Knight is also really good. I haven't watched that movie for like a few years now, but remembering it, yeah, it's like, it's got a good cast. I'm not the biggest DC fan. Can't really say much about The Dark Knight there. Spider-Man though, yeah, obviously, like, I've seen Spider-Man enough times to be like, yeah, it's a good movie, but maybe it's just because it's a sequel, and sequels kind of suck most of the time. I mean, if you picked Spider-Man 3, I would not know what to say to you. I'm so sorry. That movie is just, It's vomit.
Exactly why I picked Spider-Man 2. It is very hard to make a very commercially successful and viable superhero film that pleased everyone with Spider-Man 1, and then kick its ass with the second one. And specifically, I'm just gonna talk about, we've talked about kind of like the hero aspect of all three of these movies, but let's discuss the freaking action scenes, okay? Dark Knight has some pretty damn good action scenes. Endgame, look at that last battle. It's like half hour long. But Spider-Man 2 has a train sequence, and train sequences are very rarely beaten in film. Okay, he's saving people. Wee woo! You got that thing where you gotta hit off, and then he's like spinning through the street and like sliding on the actual pavement to catch back up to the train. You got a train to catch. He has to stop the entire force of a train with his arms. My favorite action sequence of all time.
Yeah, that's a great action sequence. Do they flip a 16-wheeler?
You bastard! I knew you were gonna do this. I knew you were gonna do this.
Do they shoot it in IMAX?
And
On IMAX cameras. And like they got practical effects train sequence they got going on. Sometimes it cuts back to Dr. Octopus with the things flapping around and you're like, oh, he looks kind of not like a real person right there.
How else would you have done it, Carson? How else would you have done it, sir? If Christopher Nolan directed Spider-Man 2, do you think he would have been able to do Doc Ock practical?
Yes.
With a bunch of puppeteers moving his arms, looking like an episode of Sesame Street?
He would have done it. And another big thing of superhero movies, the villain.
Yeah. Oh, damn it. Oh, God. Okay.
Alfred Molina's getting like controlled by like some little animatronic things, and he's a very weak character.
Did you just say Doc Ock? I don't even want to speak to
No,
him.
not that he's a complex character, but he's a weak character, and he like switches back and forth, and he has like this kind of like internal dialogue that makes him kind of a weaker character because he flip-flops.
He flip-flops and almost toes the line between, almost like a Two-Face in The Dark Knight, you might say. He flip-flops between good and evil.
He doesn't flip-flop.
He
He switches. He switches and he stays switched for the rest of the movie.
I have to interrupt, but I think my villain is the strongest out of both of you.
Physically, maybe. Mentally, Joker defeats all of you.
Thanos did kind of find a way to time travel just to win, which is pretty freaking good. You know, like Joker, okay, he flipped a couple trucks, he put an exploding cell phone in a fat guy, but did he time travel to go back to the fight in that tower?
He turned the White Knight evil and then just like
slapped the dude around in the alley, by the way.
Yes.
Jesus.
But then he switches him over to being evil and switches him over to the side of the evil people.
There is like manipulation in both of our movies, Dark Knight and Endgame. I don't know, I still think mine's like up there, but
It's up there. Final remarks. Okay, sure. Joker, you can technically be, oh, he's a better villain than Doc Ock. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. These are superhero movies, sir, not super villain movies. And these are superhero tropes. Batman barely does shit in that movie. I'm sorry. Final remarks towards Endgame. Sure, okay, you got Thanos, you got time travel, you got all that good stuff. But do you have Mr. Aziz? So -1 point for that movie, because Mr. Aziz is not in that movie. Neither is Mr. Dickovich, by the way. Rent! That guy's not in it, so I win instantly. I got Dickovich.
Superhero sidekicks. Aunt May's great, but does he talk about the ruby the size of a tangerine? And talk about like give actual advice that can help Spider-Man? No, she's just like, I'm mad at you because you lied about Uncle Ben. Like he's like, some men don't care about anything. You're gonna burn out, and he does. Like he gives advice. Thanos, like you kind of agree with him in Avengers Infinity War. Like you see him as kind of like this weird, interesting villain where you're like, I get killing half the population for like the resources and stuff like that, but then he just switches it at the end of Avengers Endgame and totally like he's just like, no, I'll just kill everybody, and he turns into like a like popcorn like regular villain.
same with Nebula. I'm pretty sure she changed, but like she wasn't fully good. Took that on, like, and got that influence from like Thanos. So yeah, again, with like manipulation, it happens in my film too. So I think you might want to get used to the trash can in the next few minutes. Pack your sleeping bags, because that's where you're headed.
Because yes, Carson made some good points in his ending little closing remarks, but Spencer's thing of saying, yeah, Dark Knight has a really good villain, but it's not about the villain, it's a superhero movie. And The Dark Knight does feel very much like the Joker show. And also the fact of Carson, you saying that Doc Ock kind of flips all over the place. Spencer, you saying, well, Two-Face, that's his whole shtick. So for the first round, I am going to give the point to Spider-Man 2 from Spencer. You get the point, my dude.
Damn Radiance for you, baby. This is your win, honey. He's off screen, I swear. Oh, big hug. Okay.
Okay, for our next category, we're talking relationships. Not specifically romantic, where I'm looking for which movie has the strongest relationship, the best relationship that aids the movie, makes the movie better, stronger, more impactful on its viewers.
I come down to 2 relationships throughout like all of the Avengers movies that I've seen. Mainly, it would have to be like Peter Parker and Tony Stark. Their relationship was like one of the best by like almost every fan, I think. Natasha and Hawkeye, I just feel they didn't get enough, but they also had that building up to the end game, like kind of shined a light and like brought everyone back in time to the first couple of movies on where they like started and how Natasha slowly built her family with the Avengers, and she finally had a place and a purpose to be there, since she never really had that. The relationships like in total with like the cast too, behind scenes, I think is amazing, and they really support each other and care, and it's got strength towards the movie and also the fans and what they see for the actors. So I think that counts too. If you like your cast a lot and you also really have strong love for the movie,
Some of the best relationships of all kinds are formed in this movie, and Sean brighter than Batman and Alfred, this mentor to Batman somehow, but also you take a look at him and you just think he's his butler, but he's so much more to him. He's his mentor, he's his father figure, he's his voice of wisdom, and he's also his comedic relief. He keeps the Dark Knight grounded. That's one of the most important parts of Batman. Batman isn't Batman without Alfred. You think Batman's gonna turn himself in, and Alfred says to Batman, he's like, they're probably gonna lock me away for this too, and Batman's like, what are you talking about? I'm gonna tell him it was all your idea. Like that little comedic thing from Batman, you couldn't get that without Alfred. Great. And Rachel Dawes, for being recast and to have that bond that the two of them have, that chemistry that the two of them have, is really impactful. And when her fate is revealed, all the more impactful. You even buy her relationship with Harvey. So when he loses her, and he loses half his face as well, and he turns into Harvey Two-Face, you understand how far he's fallen and how much he's lost. Batman and Jim Gordon, another great relationship. Gordon has to live with the fact that Batman is taking the brunt of Harvey's wrongdoings, relationships, and didn't even get to Batman and Joker. And the you complete me.
Okay, so Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man's life in this film has taken a hit. Peter's personal life. His friend doesn't want anything to do with him anymore because he feels like, almost like he's been sidelined, and this guy's taking pictures of his dad's murderer. The girl that he loves but rejected in the first movie, she has now moved on and he has to watch it. More than anything else is his relationship with Aunt May in this movie. As we know, the tragic story of Uncle Ben, Peter made a bad decision and it cost his uncle's life. In this movie, we see he actually tells the Aunt May that it was his fault. It's a brilliant idea. There's all these movies, all these superhero movies essentially have the same thing, right? Some sort of event of tragedy makes these people great, but we never really come back to that. Iron Man has that cave with a box of scraps. Batman has his parents in the alley, but this movie is like, it takes that and it factors that in, because that would be something that would affect that relationship. And every relationship in this movie means something. They all reflect a part of Peter. Doc Ock reflects Peter's kind of what would happen if Peter's mind and his ego met. Aunt May is Peter's mother figure, and it represents kind of his biggest mistake, which made him Spider-Man. And then you have Mary Jane, who represents kind of what Peter wants.
That thing that kind of changes his outlook of being Spider-Man is him with Uncle Ben. The whole thing with changing Batman's outlook is that he's going to retire. He's someday going to retire and be with Rachel. And with the loss of Rachel comes the loss of him retiring peacefully, of him retiring as the hero. You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain, and that's really what is portrayed in that film. And it's shown through all of the different characters, all the different relationships.
And with the whole Aunt May thing, and when she's there, she's not just there for some like scene, she matters. She's kind of the reason why he wants to become Spider-Man again. Like, remember, she's in the yard sale or whatever, and they're putting away boxes, and Aunt May's all like, people like stand outside like waiting for a hero, right? You know, it kind of inspires him to become Spider-Man again. And also, without saying it, kind of forgives him for what happened to his uncle.
And about Avengers Endgame, sure, there are so many different like complex revolving around relationships. You don't get down into the bare bones of them as much as you do in The Dark Knight. It spends like more time on like Hulk and Ant-Man, and you're like, this is a relationship that I did not need. It has great relationships, but spends a good amount of time elsewhere.
Like, I mean, every superhero needs someone in their life. Yeah, for Endgame, I still think it's a masterpiece with that. They all need to meet at some point and then have their little assemble and fight together so that they can work together. It wouldn't be the same if everyone was just like, who are you again? It would be Infinity War all over again with Peter Parker not remembering names. I'm sorry.
But here's what doesn't hit for me. They spend so much time sending off like our original Avengers that they forget to focus on some of our newer additions. Peter Quill, can we talk about the fact that Peter Quill comes back to Earth for the first time like 25 years and he doesn't say anything? That should be a big deal to his character. His relationship with like everyone on Earth and Earth itself should have been like, at least like, oh my God, I haven't been on Earth since, you know what I mean? They set it up, the whole relationship with his mom and his regret for not grabbing her hand. Dark Knight, it's a big movie with big themes and big messages, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. That movie feels like it almost goes too much, like it's always pushing forward. Spider-Man 2 has a scene, it's literally a 2 to 3 minute scene. A neighbor comes over and sees that Peter's like kind of feeling down and just offers him some cake. There's no big expository dialogue, there's no action scene, there's no Heath Ledger going crazy. There's just like a scene where you rest with this character and like he just has an interaction with someone and it's so human. I feel like both Endgame and Dark Knight are so big of movies that we forget to like sit with these characters and how they feel about each other sometimes. These superhero movies are not about big events. They're about big things happening to ordinary people. And I think Spider-Man 2 captures that.
I think there are small moments in the moments with Alfred, like I said, when they were like having their kind of back and forth. I didn't get to it earlier with the Joker, the unstoppable force meaning the unmovable object, the chaos meaning the order. This dynamic relationship that really makes this movie flourish. And I think the interesting thing about Spider-Man, it's Spider-Man in his own head, losing his powers, and then having to try and figure that out for himself. Like there's so many scenes where he like goes to the doctor and tries to figure out there, and then like wrestling in his own mind. The relationship that is important is with himself.
For Endgame, for like the topic of relationships, I think it was just like a whole nostalgia moment with that like category specifically. It wasn't like, oh, once again, like what Spencer said, like talking about new characters. it wasn't really shining the light on that enough because it was the last movie for them and for that cast specifically. So yeah, that could have been like a reason towards like the actors as well, and that's why they wanted to shine the light on them, because you know they might not return as these characters, and there's going to be a new generation, right, of younger and new characters coming to play. It depends on real life situations as well in the making of these projects.
Dark Knight is almost like a philosophical, it's cynical. It's a philosophical, cynical look at a superhero world if it was kind of more realistic. And I'm hesitant to say realistic because this is also a guy dressing up as a bat. You know, it actually asks you, the audience, it's like asking the audience this philosophical question. I think because Spider-Man 2 doesn't necessarily have that, I personally feel that when I watch it, I feel more fulfilled from a character standpoint because I get to sit with these characters, you know? Like, it feels like while there's these crazy action scenes and stuff going on, there's a montage to raindrops falling on my head where Peter's like eating a hot dog in the street, or you see how he interacts with like kids that he saves, and he's like, oh, right, don't go playing out in their street. Like, it's like they take the time to slow down in these movies, and that's why I think it wins in that category.
It does talk about philosophical ideas, but it's in relationship to Batman's philosophy and the Joker's philosophy. Joker's philosophy is that everything is chaos and the only order is no order. And Batman's philosophy is that we have to live by a certain set of rules or we are as worse as the people that we're fighting. That face-to-face interaction of the two relationships is what makes the scene so amazing. The battle from a point of ideals and philosophies. And that is, in turn, part of the relationship. And same with Harvey Dent. Fairness, what is fair? Leaving stuff up to chance is the only way to make it fair. Where is the Iron Man and Captain America relationships? Where's the deepness of... When they go to them, it's so deep and it's so rich. But for a lot of the part, you're taken away from that.
My judging, but here's where things ought to get interesting, because Spencer brought up the point that the whole thing with a superhero movie is big things happening to ordinary people, which is a really good point, except that directly relates to the situation of Carson talking about how Spider-Man's kind of just all alone in Spider-Man 2. Like, he's got these little moments, like with the kids he rescues, with the neighbor that comes and offers him cake. But really, the only big relationship thing that's happening in Spider-Man 2, according to your debate, is that of Aunt May and Peter Parker. And you, Spencer, you never really talked about or tried to rebut that point that really Spider-Man 2 is more about what's going on in his own head and his tackling with his own mind about being a superhero. But this round, I do have to give to Carson with The Dark Knight because the points he made were good and were not properly rebutted in my honorable judge opinion.
It's Brian Spidey. We'll get him next time, man. We're coming for you. Me and Sam Raimi. He's right over here, I promise you. I'm Sam Raimi.
I want to know, what is the best story? Which of your movies has the best story?
The plot. How about this? There's story and there's plot. The plot of The Dark Knight is about a district attorney, a police officer, and a Batman. They're doing is trying to take down all the mobs in Gotham City. And what the mobs do in response is they hire this guy named the Joker to kill the Batman. That's the plot. The story is about the duality of man and how easy it is for somebody to turn evil, for somebody to twist their intentions in a way and fall into the darkness. And it's really shown through the Joker he's trying to prove to Batman that Harvey Dent, the White Knight, all it takes is one little push. That's what he's trying to do with the boats, with the yacht, with the ferries that are full of people where they can have the ability to kill each other. He wants to prove that everybody deep down is sick. Everybody deep down will do whatever it takes, get their selfish needs. And at the end, what Batman proves, what overtakes selfishness, is hope and symbolism and purpose. When he says, I am the Batman that they need. I'm not the Batman they deserve. I'm not the Batman they want. I'm the Batman they need. I'm the villain. I'm gonna drench myself in this man's blood to maintain the hope of Gotham City.
You didn't do it in the Christian Bale voice.
I am the Dark Knight.
Endgame is the continuation of Infinity War to slaughter Thanos in a way. To defeat the villain. Honestly, I might have to debunk Endgame a little bit for the story. I mean, it's strong, but it's got a lot of random points in it. And the fact that they want to fit in so much into that because of everything that happened before, again, with relationships, and they're trying to fit all of those sequences into one film. So that's why we get time travel. I do have a strong say about directors and directing. I think it was phenomenal, and Anthony and Joe Russo are they're awesome. I think they're great directors, and they do have a bright future with other projects. And the fact that they didn't change so much, drastically, in their directing style from past films like Civil War. I think they directed that too.
Yeah.
I hope. So Civil War and Infinity War, they all kept it kind of leveled and equal. So then when fans returned back to theaters and watched these movies, they were like, oh, okay, yeah, I get what's going on, right? Instead of other trilogies, the new Star Wars films that came out, all three of those movies were drastically changed. I don't know if the same directors were directing any of those movies because I didn't really pay too much attention to that. And even with the last Star Wars film, it was almost as if they needed a reason to drastically change their whole storyline and fit everything in Endgame into one movie, so then they can have more audience members going to attend these.
Okay, let's move into open debate. I'm so sorry, Spencer. My brain wasn't working. I apologize. Spider-Man 2 from Spencer Fleming. He still exists.
Let's go for a walk.
Oh my gosh.
Spider-Man's story, what happens in it, the plot, is Spider-Man is struggling balancing being Peter Parker and Spider-Man. His relationships are suffering from it. And when he finds kind of this new mentor in Dr. Otto Octavius obviously goes evil and is now Doc Ock. And after that happens, and with everything that's going on in his life, he starts losing the ability to be Spider-Man, which makes him question if he should be Spider-Man at all. So he has to kind of find it within himself to essentially answer his own question: should he be Spider-Man? Is it worth it? Why it means so much to me personally is because it's a story of perseverance. It's a story of someone who has been beaten down and consistently will still do the right thing, which is why Spider-Man is my favorite hero in spades. Every comic book he's ever in, any good one worth its salt, Spider-Man doesn't always get what he wants. He does what he needs to do. And I think that's just such an empowering thing, especially for a kid to watch that. I was like, wow, this is crazy. This guy consistently does the right thing. So that's why the story means that much to me. Now, directing, this has style, bro. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 has directing pizzazz. Okay, you know what I'm saying? All right, here's what I'm talking about. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movie treats it like a comic book. They do things that are not necessarily realistic, but it's like, hey, this is a comic book movie. Let's have fun. There's a montage to raindrops keep falling on my head. There's a scene where Spider-Man breaks through a newspaper that says he's back, almost as if it's straight out of a comic panel, and then swings through the city only for the camera to zoom out and you're in Doc Ock's glasses and the city is just a reflection. None of that makes any sense, but it's amazing to look at. And I miss back in cinema was we don't have to exposition and explain why everything makes sense.
Listen. Beginning of The Dark Knight opens. It's the beautiful Joker bank robbery, shot in IMAX, with this cool thing. You don't know what's going on, thrown right into you don't get exposition right away. You're just thrown into the situation. The clowns being killed off after each one, leading to the reveal of the Joker. I watched Spider-Man 2. You know how long it takes to get to that hospital scene? 40 minutes. 40 minutes it takes to get to that hospital scene. What are you? The stakes, the meat of the film does not start until 40 minutes in. Because maybe the meat of the film is Spider-Man trying to figure out himself. Trying to figure out his own problems. Trying to figure out, should I be Spider-Man? Should I not be Spider-Man? What should I do? Maybe that's the meat of the film. But it's kind of unclear. There's nothing unclear. The Dark Knight has like this complex story of like all these different stories interconnecting. But they still make sense. They still don't feel like they're splitting their time between two different movies, which it kind of feels like Spider-Man 2 is. And Spider-Man 2 takes out like 10 minutes out of the end, slap dab right in the middle of like the Mary Jane problem, just to set up Spider-Man 3. Harry Osborn being all like talking to his father and being all bad now.
Okay, sir. How long does it take to get to the hospital scene? How long does it take to get to your hospital scene? An hour and a half. A villain doesn't actually become a villain until the last hour of the movie. You want to talk about the meat of the story? Okay, sir. Two-Face becomes Two-Face an hour and a half into the movie. The last hour of the movie. Which means we have two villains, but only one of them actually becomes the villain an hour and a half in. 40 minutes is not that much to ask. It's not that much.
Have you not heard of a character arc?
Especially, okay, Doc Ock has one too. Okay, with the T.S. Eliot, and then he's like, oh yeah, no, I know me. I wouldn't endanger the city. I know what I'm doing, Peter. And then he blows up the city, or almost does, and like costs his wife life and all that stuff. And then he becomes Doc Ock in that moment. There's a buildup. There's an arc. There's an arc that flows through there before he becomes Doc Ock. On top of that, you also get the brilliant hospital scene from Sam Raimi, directed by Sam Raimi as if it was an Evil Dead movie. You walked into this trap, buddy. You got arms flying. It's a straight up horror movie. When I saw this shit as a kid, I pissed myself in the theater, cried, and pissed myself again. It's amazing. It's style, it's substance. It's like a living, breathing comic book is eating me. I'm like, oh my God. It's taking my soul.
I have one question for Spencer. Did you actually pee yourself in the theater?
Yes. Well, I mean, unrelated. I was 3. That's more so why it happened. But also because it was awesome. I did pee myself in the theaters. And I would do it again, damn it. Hold me back. Hey, everyone bring one scene as an example why your director is better than the other directors. I have, like...
The beginning heist. That kind of high-octane heist is only done by Chris Nolan. You see it in Inception and you see it in this. You see it in all his films. That type of high octane throwing you right into the action and kind of leaves you waiting to catch up. It trusts its audience. It doesn't treat its audience like babies.
Which is why I think it's the best crime movie ever made. This is a superhero movie, sir. That scene proves to me that Chris Nolan wanted to make a big budget crime movie but couldn't do it because what happens? No one's gonna fund it because there's no recognizable anything. So you bank it on a property that everybody knows and you get the heist scene at the beginning of The Dark Knight. Beautiful scene. I've seen heist scenes before. You know? Sam Raimi's directing will give you something that you haven't seen. That transition through the eye, literally like the sunglass thing, that was insane. I've never seen anything like that. Anytime I see it, I get goosies. Goosies. Goosies! He directs it with his heart and soul. Instead of just showing Spider-Man swing, you're swinging with him. He goes the extra mile. Even in like the current Spider-Man series, when I see Spider-Man swinging, I see inspiration from Sam Raimi. Like he literally, there is no other superhero movies that have come out since then without Spider-Man 2. This guy has shaped the genre.
With the whole Sam Raimi topic, like in my opinion, I kind of think that Anthony and Joe Russo have that ability to like change up things, you know, and change up scenes, because like not everything is supposed to be the same. I've seen like some parallels in the other movies that they try to make, like in Avengers and Endgame and like in Winter Soldier, with the references. They had that brought back in Endgame, so that was kind of cool. And I think that was like a big moment when they had the portal scene where everyone was coming back from the dead. I was kind of like pumped about that just because it's like, oh, it's nostalgic. What? All directors do the same thing that Sam Raimi does. Like, I can't say that, The Dark Knight is a bad movie because it's like, oh, I did a parallel of my other movies and now I'm like doing it in this movie. Like, every director has their own style and they are allowed to do it again. So I think that kind of just like ties all of us into one knot on that topic. Everyone's gonna have a favorite director, but you can't say like, oh, there's only one director, the one and only, Like, I could say that about John Hughes. He's my favorite director ever.
If you're talking about unique imprint, the whole Dark Knight is shot so uniquely.
You said IMAX one more time, sir.
A lot of the action scenes are shot on IMAX cameras. Opening that film up with that huge IMAX screen, there's nothing that gives me goosies. And just because a transition is cool doesn't mean that the whole movie that's just one little thing that gives you goosies, sure. All the little details in each scene of The Dark Knight is so good. I watched it again. When the Joker walks into the banquet and shoots the shotgun, everyone flinches except for Alfred. See him in the background, he doesn't flinch. That kind of detailed-oriented environment could only be built by a director like Chris Nolan. Sam Raimi doesn't have those wide shots that let other people have the control over the scene. Let the Joker go. Let people like Michael Caine have their moment like that. I have to say, love the movie in Sam Raimi. Kind of seems like he's quite a control freak. Chris Nolan is probably a perfectionist, but he also knows when to keep it wide, when to keep that shot wide and let the actors and let everything else do their job. And Avengers Endgame, it's cookie cutter. Like, you take inspiration from Joss Whedon and you just use that as the format for your Avengers films. It seems like it's not really coming from the voice of the Russo brothers. It seems like it might be coming from the voice of Kevin Feige and a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Chris Nolan, the perfect medium. Control freak, has that kind of control over the film that maybe Anthony and Joe Russo don't have, but he also lets it breathe a little bit.
Yeah, it is cookie cutter, but I like cookie cutter. Everyone's got their own opinions. Everyone is gonna like something different. Yeah, you're gonna love that, and you're gonna look for those things, right? That you've learned.
Sure. Christopher Nolan, okay, great attention to detail. Michael Caine didn't flinch. However, the scene where Bruce Wayne pulls the bullet out of the wall and rescans it still makes zero sense. Such attention to detail that you can't even fix that that actual plot point. Ain't your script, sir. Boom! Sam Raimi mask down. Second, Sam Raimi doesn't pay attention and let the camera slow down, get the wide shots off of that stuff. He has a montage in this movie that has nothing to do with Spider-Man. There's the cake scene where he literally just sits down and has cake with some girl that's his neighbor. There's the character of Mr. Dickovich, who doesn't need to be in the movie, but it shows that like Peter has a life outside of Spider-Man. Anytime Peter's doing something, you're constantly reminded that he has to pay his rent. Mr. Dickovich will come outside and be like, rent, and he's running away from it. There's this scene at the theater where he stops to tie his shoe, and the guy's like, oh, no, sorry, we can't let you back in the thing. There's tons of those little moments. So I think Spider-Man is riddled. The two movies that Spider-Man 2 is going up against today are really big and iconic films, and a lot of the time I feel like Spider-Man 2 is being forgotten because of Spider-Man 3 and the kind of how everyone was unhappy with how that movie turned out and how there's been Spider-Man reboots afterwards. I just want to call attention to the fact that I understand this is my personal favorite movie, and I'll defend this movie till I die, but this movie just has an essence of heart.
I think generally the debate ended up going like a little ways away from story, because that's what this category is called. It's called story. And part of that is directing, but the main thing about this category is story, not really filmmaking. And I do feel like this went kind of a bit away from that. So the different stylistic choices of Chris Nolan having these wider shots and Sam Raimi having closer character-driven shots is style. And maybe the Russo brothers seeming cookie cutter, they've just have been able to make more Marvel movies and be able to do that style because that's what the Marvel movies are. So I think that point kind of gets pushed down in the arguments that were made. How it's a superhero movie, and and Spider-Man 2 treated the story and treated the movie as a superhero movie in that comic book styling. So the going through the sunglasses and Doc Ock's glasses and the swinging and the through the newspaper and everything, that's very comic book-like, that's very superhero-like, and that's what the debate is about. It's what's the best superhero movie? Carson was really the only person that delved super deep into story, even though that was only in his opening remarks, that Spencer brought up saying, Dark Knight is a crime movie. It's more about crime and the figuring out of that crime than it is about superheroes. And this is a superhero movie. And based on what the category is, and based on what the title of this episode is, best superhero movie, and based on argument alone, I have to give it to Spider-Man 2. I wish you guys could see what Spencer
Damn, we did it, baby! I just want to. Can I accept my Oscar?
Yes, here you go. You have 15 seconds for your speech,
wait.
and we're playing
Oh,
the
God.
music.
My stand's falling apart. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. I really should have prepared something. Okay. So I would just like to say thank you so much for this. I thank my mom, my dad, and all my fans out there. And I'm just happy that we live in a world where nerdy stuff like this that I got bullied for as a kid can be debated on a podcast. And I'm happy to do it with you guys, my friends.
This has been fun, and you've been listening to Babbling
with the boys and girlies.
I'm Roxanne, and at the high time that we were recording this podcast episode, my parents were watching The Dark Knight just downstairs.
Amazing. I've been experiencing a lot of new things this year, and this podcast was one of them. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Roxanne's parents, of course, picked the right movie to watch, picked the best movie to watch. But anyway, thank you, Sabrina, for joining the show, and we hope to have you on again soon. This has been awesome. I love debating, even when I lose.
Okay, I'm Spence the Chef, and I want to thank Roxanne for helping this thing run so smoothly.
For all those people out there in the wide world, you know what you do. You stay spicy.
Stay spicy, folks. Wait, everyone say it. Ready?
Everyone say it.
Spicy. Spicy. My
Notice
name.
that Carson thanked Sabrina and not me. I don't know. I just want to bring that
It's
up.
okay. It's okay. I'll thank you.
I'll thank you later.
Oh, wow.
He wins, ladies and gentlemen. In this shocking turn of events, I'm telling my mom.